Welcome to Ask Earl Anything. This is the show where your questions make the show. This is episode 54. And today I've got a bunch of questions from the last show. And as you can see, I'm wearing one of my favorite shirts today for all of you that are into my fashion statement. Now, believe it or not, this shirt has got some powerful meaning to me, okay? Because this is my favorite purple shirt that I haven't worn in a while. So I don't know if any of you are noticing it, but I've lost a few pounds, so I'm working on this. So one of the things I'm working on this year, and I've lost a few pounds to be able to fit back in this shirt. Feels good, even though it looks really bad. But hey, what are you gonna do? I've got some questions. Here are the questions for this week's show. Let's start off with Jazz Drummer Man, and he asks a question. He says, "Hey Earl, I hope all is good, buddy. I bought a pair of new Kasza F-Series 14-inch hi-hats, medium bottom, light top. Can you give me some info or any history about these kind of cymbals? Thanks." Well, Jazz Drummer Man, here's what I know about Kasza cymbals. Not a lot, to be honest. I will tell you that I did a little research because I saw your question. I went online. Big Bang Distribution is distributing these cymbals. Now, what does that mean? Well, in our new world, a world that has more than just Zildjian cymbals and Paiste cymbals, a world that has Sabian and Meinel and Istanbul, okay, and these cymbals have been all around since the 1980s. Sabians came in the 80s, Meinel came in the 80s that I know about. Istanbul came in the 80s, okay? Why did these cymbals start showing up in the 80s? Well, the Zildjian market and the Paiste market were well established in Zildjian back to 1929, from what I remember, in the United States, and they've been making cymbals since the 1600s. Okay, that's what Zildjian means, cymbal maker. Okay, Paiste since the 1950s, as far as I can tell, but they may go back further. I think there's a new documentary by Drumeo on Paiste, and I didn't catch the beginning when they said they started making cymbals, but I think it goes back in the early 1900s somewhere, where the father of the Paiste brothers, who own the company today, I think he had a music store. So I'm not sure when he started making the cymbals, though. I don't have the exact date. But prior to 1979, those were the only two cymbal companies I knew of that were not what they called Zildjian seconds or Crut or Camber. Okay, Crut and Camber were just really terrible cymbals. You didn't want them. Crut was brass, Camber was nickel something. Paiste made a nickel something, so they might have been making Camber cymbals. Crut were made by, God, I don't know who made them. They were terrible cymbals, Crut. They were the worst cymbals of the 70s. You got them with really bad import kits, okay? Zildjian, Advitas Zildjian died in 1979, and the two brothers split the business up in 1980. And when that happened, Armand Zildjian kept the Zildjian name, and he gave it to his daughters, who basically run the company today. And Robert Zildjian started Sabian. And Sabian stands for Sally, Billy, and Andy. That's his three kids, his three children. And that's the first letters of their name made Sabian. That was 1981-82 in the United States. Right around that same time, somewhere in the 1980s, you found Meinel. Now, I am forgetting one important cymbal company, which is UFIP, which stands for something Union Fabricators in Italian. It's the Italian word for cymbal. Patti. I don't speak Italian or Spanish very well. Been to Italy, great, beautiful place. I wish I could speak Italian. But UFIP is an Italian cymbal maker that was making them for a long time too. I really forgot about them. I should not have forgot about them. Okay? But what happened in the 80s was Meinel showed up, Sabian showed up, Istanbul showed up. Now, Istanbul was a bunch of the cymbal makers that worked at the old K Zildjian factory back in the 70s, who basically said, we make cymbals too. Let's make them our way. We know the secret formula, B20, and we're going to make basically K-zildjians. And a lot of jazz guys in the 80s started finding Istanbuls. And it wasn't Istanbul Agop or Istanbul Mehet. It was just Istanbul because Agop and Mehet owned Istanbul. And that's the way it stayed until, I believe, it wasn't even Agop. Agop was the brother's name. I forget his name. Might have been Agop. Anyhow, the bottom line was, when one of them died, it was not Mehet. The Agop side became the sons of the other owner, and they started Agop, Istanbul, and Mehet took the Mehet side. What also happened when that happened was all of a sudden we had other cymbal makers in Turkey making cymbals. And by the 2000s, you started seeing companies like Bosphorus showing up. Crescent, eventually Crescent, which came out of Bosphorus. You started to find companies like Soultone. And Soultone, I have a friend who's got a Soultone endorsement. There was a bunch of other ones that started to come out of the Turkish cymbal making tradition. And I believe Kasza is just another one of them that have come out of it. Now, some of these companies sold blanks. Some of these companies sold the actual cymbals. They make them in Turkey. I don't know what Kasza falls under. By the way, I left out a whole nother company, which would be the Wuhan China company, making China cymbals in Wuhan, China. They didn't really get into making drum set cymbals as we know them today, rides and crashes, until the 90s, 2000s, somewhere in there they started making those. So Kasza comes out of that. As far as what I know about Kasza is those are the fusion line of cymbals. They're supposedly got a fusiony sound to them. To be honest, any of those B20 cymbals coming out of Turkey that are made by all the different companies that make them, and there's a lot of companies, by the way, Kasza is just one of the many. I really couldn't tell you what makes those cymbals sound what they sound like. Some of them sound great. I've heard some sound not so much. Some sound like Zildjian knockoffs. Some sound like K-Zildjian knockoffs. Some, they're all unique. Only thing I can tell you that's happened since the 80s is the mystique of finding that special K cymbal is gone. Everybody makes a K cymbal. I mean, the new Meinel foundry cymbals, Byzance foundry cymbals, are making basically Keropes. They're making the Kerope, the thin K, dark jazz cymbals. They're making them. Istanbul's been making them for years. Agop and Mehet. Zildjian makes them now, with the Advatus line and the, being more like the A-Zildjians of the 60s and 50s, and the Keropes and the Constantinoples. They started making those in the 90s. They were all going for that K thing, that Istanbul K sound. So today you've got the gamut of cymbals, and what makes a cymbal company unique is the quality of their product. And I couldn't vouch for the quality of the product of Kasza if I tried. Kasza doesn't mean anything more to me than Saluda or Masterworks or Heartbeat. I mean, these all can be great cymbals, by the way, guys. I have no idea. I've invested a lot of money in really pro-level cymbals for my whole life. And I found that I've got my Zildjians, and I've got my Sabians, and I've got my Paistis, and I've got a few Istanbuls. And truthfully, unless the price of these cymbals is so cheap and the sound is so great, I wouldn't be buying them. And that's not my experience. I have a friend who's a Soultone endorser, and the Soultones cost about a discounted price for Sabians. If you're a Sabian endorser, they were about a discounted price of a Sabian ride. So they weren't paying that much difference from what you'd get on a discounted ride cymbal in a music store. You're just getting the status of being an endorser for Soultone. So that's my take on it. Are your Kasza's great cymbals? They could be awesome cymbals for all I know. Jazz Drummer Man, not really sure. But I will tell you it probably came out of a factory in Turkey. And that's the one thing you can kind of bet on. Great question, though, and thank you for the question. The next question comes from Paco Drums. And Paco asked me a question. He goes, "Hello, Earl. Great informative show. I have a question for your next show. Basic concepts of lighting for optimization of our domestic videos with smartphones and basic cameras. Minimum lighting equipment with minimal costs. Natural light through the window, yes or no. Conditioning off stage in some way in particular. Thanks in advance for your time and dedication. Surely the subject deserves a monograph, but is not what I try. Simply optimization for our home videos for most of us." All right. To be honest, Paco, my production is pretty lame-o, okay? I look at guys like Michael Perry and Uzi Boobadoo and Beats by Jay and drum covers by Bill, and I see guys that buy lighting rigs and smoke and all kinds of cool stuff. It's not my thing. I use some very basic lights. I have 2 lighting stands that my son gave me that came with fluorescent lights and umbrellas. And occasionally you'll see me using those. I rarely use the fluorescent lights. I have used them on some videos. The majority of the time what I'm using is nothing more than I think it's a 75 watt indoor can, ceiling mounted can light bulb, indoor lighting, spot throw. And I'm using 3 of them today. I have some natural lighting in my studio. I really don't use anything else, and I need to buy some lights. Occasionally what I do for cool lighting effects is I'll use the 2 camera lights here, maybe with the umbrellas on them, and I'll stick a light in my floor tom, under my floor tom or under my snare drum, and you'll see a lit snare, and it looks kind of cool, and it only has 2 lights going on. But truthfully, my lighting for my cameras is not really that great. I do a lot of work where I'm using my smartphone. Matter of fact, this whole show is recorded on my iPhone. Occasionally I'll use my iPad, and I also use a DSLR. So that's my lighting tricks. I don't really have any lighting tricks. I'm not the guy to ask that question of. I mean, if you like the lighting in my videos, that's awesome, but I know I can improve my lighting 100-fold. Right? Now, as far as the treatment of the room, this is a recording studio. I've recorded albums in this studio, so the sound of this room is pretty good. It's not great. It's not perfect. If I had some guy who was a real studio designer come in, I'm sure he'd find my problems in the room. But for me, the sound treatment on the walls and stuff, it sounds pretty good. I will tell you, for presentation purposes, I have thought about, and I'm still thinking about, putting up a black curtain around my kit, or a white curtain. Some guys put green screens, like Tony from All Classic Drum Covers. He puts a green screen up all the time. Green screens are hard. I tried it. It doesn't work really. It's not easy to work with. But I think black would be kind of cool, and I may someday actually put some PVC piping and get some clamps to go on the PVC piping to put those kind of boxes in a black. I might do that at some point. I've goofed around with that a little bit. I actually have the stands to actually do that with too, but I haven't done that yet. Anyhow, just some thoughts on how you can approach it. But for me, I like my studio vibe, so you pretty much get my studio in most of the videos. You get a couple, 3 lights. Occasionally I leave the lights on. Sometimes I have the light coming in through the window. I do have a window in the studio. It's in the back of the studio. I never really shut the drapes on that. So if it's nighttime, it's dark. If it's not nighttime, you get some light in, etc. But that's really the answer to that question, Paco. And thank you so much for asking the question. I do appreciate it. You're a first-time question answerer, just like Jazz Drummer Man. I've never had a question from him either, so thank you. My next question comes from Mysterious Mansion. And Mysterious Mansion asks the question, howdy, do you have any interesting stories about Tony Williams or Elvin Jones? Any kind of hidden away in obscure interviews? Could be about them, their equipment, hard to find. You have an encyclopedic encyclopedia of knowledge in your head. I'm curious if you know any of the stories or the deep lore. All right. I probably know more about their equipment than I know about their deep stories and their stories about their gigs and stuff. I have heard other people talk about stories about Elvin and about Tony. Players like Greg Bissonette or Peter Erskine, but they're not interviews. There's a great documentary on Elvin Jones called A Different Drummer. It's from the 70s. He was playing Gretsch drums at the time. He plays, is it 2-card Molly or 3-card Molly? I can't remember which, but it's that famous jazz tune that Steve Smith did at one of the drum festivals. I think it's 2-card Molly. Anyhow, he explains 2-card Molly on it. He explains his melodic playing on it. It's a great documentary to learn about Elvin Jones. Elvin Jones is a unique guy. He had some issues early on in life when he was with Coltrane. I think he had some drug issues. I don't know a lot about those stories. I do know he cleaned up. He married this Japanese girl, Kiko, and she was the tour manager for his jazz machine forever, from the 70s on. She set up his drums. I mean, she was the person, that took care of Elvin on the road. He had a band called Jazz Machine for years. Elvin was a known Kay Zildjian guy, but if you watch videos of Elvin, you will find that he didn't always play Kays, and he is known to have had all different types of cymbals. He's had Paistis, he's had Sabians, he's had Istanbuls. He was an Istanbul endorser for a while. I know Zildjian did a tribute to him before he passed away. His major drum company was Gretsch up until 1978-79. He went with Tama at that point, and actually was the first Camco endorser for the new Tama Camco drums. He played them for a couple of years until they stopped making Tama Camcos. Then he started playing the Tama Superstar drums. And eventually he went to Yamaha. And I think he stayed with Yamaha a long period of time. Probably from like the late 80s, early 90s, right to his death in the mid-2000s, somewhere in there. Elvin was a great drummer. Very unique player. He wasn't Mr. Time. He played Elvin all the time. He played loud, he played hard, he played polyrhythmically. Very unique player. Tony Williams, if you want to check out Tony Williams, you would check out Miles Davis, especially the Miles Davis playing in the 60s. With Herbie Hancock. He also played with Jackie Wilson. He had his own band, Lifetime. That's when he started fusing rock and jazz in the 70s. Tony was a Gretsch player until the last couple of years of his life. Tony went on to play DW drums in the end. He had a set of DW drums that were the ugliest DW drums I've ever seen in my life. It was Tony Williams Yellow, which was really cool, but he had these red lugs on it. I don't know what got into his head. He also had 2 kick drums built for him at that point in time. Tony was not afraid to change. He embraced some of the electronic drums, the Simmons drums when they first came out. He had some Simmons drums. I don't know if he ever used, I don't think he used them on jazz stuff, but he had a set. He talked about that in one of his interviews. He wasn't afraid of the technology coming up. But that yellow Gretsch kit was his kit for a long time. When he was with Miles Davis, it was a silver sparkle Gretsch kit, and then he had a really small little Gretsch kit with the early Lifetime band, and then he went to a 24-inch kick, 9x13, 10x14, 14x14, 16x16, 16x18, 14x24-inch bass drum, 6.5x14 snare drum, wood Gretsch snare drum with the lightning throw off, all in yellow, Tony Williams yellow paint. Very cool drum kit. He played that for a long, long time with CS black dot heads on it. Even the snare drum had a CS black dot head, not a coated black dot head, a clear black dot head on it. He played Kay Zildjian cymbals a lot early on. They were the early Ks. He eventually played the Zildjian EAKs and helped them develop that line until his death in the mid-90s when he had a gallbladder operation and passed away after the operation with complications. There is an interesting video of him playing with Stan Getz in the 70s on some show that was, I think it was on TBS, or PBS, excuse me, not TBS, PBS, Public Broadcasting. And he's playing some Kasza cymbals on this show. He's got a Gretsch kit with some Kasza cymbals. So I don't know if they were filming it in Europe somewhere and he had Kasas that day. They were 2002s. Very, very cool seeing Tony playing something different. He sounds like Tony on Kasza cymbals. But not a lot of stories about him, about Tony. I mean, I read some of the articles, and the articles all got into his equipment and things like that. He was heavily rudimental, meaning if you watch him play, he knows his rudiments. As much as he didn't, they say he wasn't rudimental, meaning he wasn't Buddy Rich, he had rudimental chops. And if you watch him play, you can see the rudimental chops in his playing. So Tony was very unique in that respect. He was more precise than Elvin. Elvin always seemed a little sloppy to me, but he had that sloppy jazz thing that he was cool at. It was cool. Elvin, you can't say anything bad about Elvin Jones playing. He was strong and powerful in there. Both of them had time things. These guys played jazz, and jazz had up and downs, and jazz was not metronomic. And by today's standards, most of the jazz guys didn't have perfect time. They didn't have studio time. They had jazz time, and they moved with the band. And that was kind of what they did. And if you listen to some of those old recordings or the old YouTubes you find, these guys playing, you'll see that it moves. That's just kind of how music was. Music breathed. So, but yeah, no real stories about either of them. Drum kit wise, Elvin's drum kit was from the Gretsch era, and he kept doing it. He always had a 18-inch bass drum, even if he was playing 12, 8x12, 9x13, 14x14, 16x16, or 16x18. Okay, and sometimes he had 13, 14, 16, 18 floor toms with an 18-inch bass drum. He used an 18-inch floor tom a lot. Hi, bye sticks. Dropped you off the seat. Sorry about that. He used an 18-inch bass drum his whole career, but I think he used an 18-inch floor tom just as much, by the way. So he had big toms. That was Elvin's thing. So, anyhow, that's it. That's my Elvin and Tony stories for this week. Maybe I'll come up with something next time too, but that's what I've got for this week. All right, and I've got one more group of questions. This one comes from Michael Perry. He says, great video, couple questions for Ask Earl Anything. The first question is, would you consider selling your Gretsch drum set? If so, what would be your asking price? Second question is, do you play double bass pedal? And if not, why not? And the third question is, have you ever been negatively criticized for your drumming? If so, please elaborate. All right, first question, would I consider selling my Gretsch drum kit? And the answer to the question is no. This Gretsch drum kit will probably come with me till the last place I can play it. And when I can't play it anymore, I will probably have at least one grandchild, maybe two grandchildren that want to play drums. Maybe three, maybe four, who knows. But I have a son-in-law that's a drummer. And if nothing else, I would give it to my son-in-law, Aaron, to have the kit. If nothing else, I would give him this kit. All right, I'm sure he's going to get something out of my collection when all's said and done, be it a set of cymbals or whatever else. But I feel like this kit is not, I would never sell this kit. It's the kit I bought in college, and even if I bought a brand new kit, I would not sell this kit. This kit would stay with me. This is just too valuable to me. So the Gretsch kit will stay with me my lifetime. That's my plan anyhow. And if I do sell it, that means I'm not doing YouTube anymore. That's for sure. No doubt about it. Do I play double pedal? And the answer to that question is yes, I play double pedal. Do I play it well? No, I do not play it well. I play it pretty poorly, actually. I've never really worked on it. I can do the 16th note thing, and get a pretty decent speed out of that, but nothing metal-esque. I also use it more for patterns than I do for double bass playing, traditional double bass playing. I'll also say this, I do use it for a couple ending type fills, you know. But truthfully, double bass playing is kind of like, I feel like I play like I'm falling down a set of stairs, to be honest. I almost never touch double bass, I will tell you that story. In the late 80s, a friend of mine from work, it was the late 80s? I think it was late 80s or early 90s. It must have been the late 80s. Somebody gave me a double pedal to try. And I brought the double pedal home and I tried it. And it was just so awkward to me. It felt like I was relearning how to play drums. I quit. I didn't touch it. Then I was in a band, and the lead singer was getting married, and we went to his wedding, and we sat in with the band that was playing the wedding. And the drummer had double pedal, and I was just enamored by smacking that thing that day, you know, just playing crap. Just lots of crap was being played. Not a lot of pocket, me just goofing off on a double pedal. So then I got that in my brain like, oh, I can do this. So somebody at work had a double pedal for sale, and it was the first version of the DW5000 with the extension pedal added on a plate. So you had one pedal, then you had a second pedal with an extension arm out. And I had that pedal for about 10, 12 years into the mid-2000s, and then I sold it. And when I sold it, I picked up a Iron Cobra Tama Iron Cobra Flexi Flyer double pedal, which means it's got the strap on it instead of the chain. And it's out right now. It's on the kit in there, the other room. It's not. It used to be on this kit all the time. I was teaching a kid who did double bass, so I always had it in the studio. But right now, it's not even on the studio kit. I'm just playing single pedal. So, double pedal's not my thing, to be honest. But I can do it, and I have done it. A couple videos where I do some double pedal on would be, one is Katrina and the Waves, Walking on Sunshine. I threw some double pedal in that one. Somebody just commented on that video not too long ago, and I listened to it, and I said, oh yeah, I was doing the double pedal thing. It's kind of cool at the end. So if you want to hear me playing double pedal, that's one you can do it on. And the last question was, have you ever been negatively criticized for your drumming? And the answer to that question is yes. I have to be honest, you know, early on in my playing career, if I was one of those people that basically took criticism to heart, I would not be a drummer today. I would have quit a long time ago. I've worked for people that are not very nice. I've worked for people that are not very encouraging. I mean, I went to music school, and I had some issues with pitch and hearing pitch and singing. And the college choir director basically wouldn't let me sing in college choir the first semester of school. So I got to work the tape machine for my C grade in his class. I got a C in college choir. Everybody else got an A. I was there at every rehearsal, but I got a C. I was allowed to use the tape machine. He told me to change my major too. I didn't. I had a couple teachers in college told me to change my major. But yeah, I've had people tell me, you can't do this. You're not capable of playing this. You've got problems with your time. You've got problems with how loud you are. I've had that issue in church. I was playing in a church once, and I had the pastor basically coming out of the sermon, kind of address my loud drumming. This was before drum booths and the plexiglass and all that stuff. I got hammered by the pastor of the church for playing drums in church one day. That was pretty wicked. A wicked rebuke coming from a pulpit. That's pretty interesting. I've had that. I've had, you know, I don't get a lot, but I've gotten some. I think we all get it at some point. I'll tell you, when I went to Nashville in 1987 and did a record with a band called Saved by Grace, I got replaced off the drums, the drum kit, I was replaced by a studio drummer named John Hammond, and greatest drum lesson of my life. But I will tell you that when you've got everybody upset that you're not locking in, and it takes 3 hours to record a ballad on the second day of tracking, and you're supposed to have 3 songs done by lunch, and we only had 1. That was a pretty tense morning, and we went to lunch, and by lunchtime I was gone. I didn't sit down with the kid again the rest of the sessions. That was the end of it. So I pretty much got fired at lunchtime. They brought a session drummer in the evening, and I watched why he got hired, because he killed it. And I learned a huge lesson about why people bring in session drummers, because some drummers can't handle the pressure, and I wasn't prepared for that. That was the first time I played drum kit on anything in the studio. I had been in the studio before doing percussion, but I had never played drum kit till Nashville, Tennessee in 1987. Now, after Nashville, I would come home, I would work with a metronome, and I would learn from that lesson. And I would go on to play lots of session dates for people, and people would hire me for doing records and doing things. So I've done albums, and I've done recording in New York City, and I've done recording in New Jersey and down here in Florida. So I've had some success. As a matter of fact, I'm on 6 cuts of that album. So it's not like I didn't record on the album and get on the album. I didn't get axed on day 1. I got axed day 2. But it was a ballad that put me out. It was playing with the click that was the problem at that point. So yeah, I've dealt with rejection. I've dealt with people not liking my playing. Sometimes that hurts. Sometimes that's hurtful. But sometimes those are the lessons that helps you to grow in ways you'll never understand until you've gone through it. So I would say let those lessons come and don't take it personal. If you love it, you'll stay with it. And if you stay with it, you can be a success in what you're doing. So don't let anybody tell you any different. And that's my word of advice on that situation. But be realistic. I mean, I was realistic in these situations. When somebody said something about my volume issues, I had to deal with that. When somebody said something about my time issues, I had to deal with that. When somebody said something about my pitch problem, I had to deal with that, and I learned. Number 1, I learned not to take college choir. I got out of college choir and went into men's choir. Went into men's choir, they put me next to people that had better ears, and I would latch onto their pitches, and I succeeded in men's choir. And about 5 or 6 years after being out of college, I got a phone call from the men's choir director who said we were doing something at an Independence Day thing at Ellis Island, and he wanted me to come sing. I just cracked me up. It was like, you're asking me to come sing? Not play drums, you want me to come sing? That cracked me up. But again, my pitch problem wasn't that bad with him. It was just that one guy didn't like it. You know what I mean? But I will tell you, that gave me, to this day, it gives me this thing that I don't hear pitch right. And I'm not sure flat or sharp sometimes. And I think that's the confidence factor I lost. And if I hadn't gotten over the click track issue in Nashville, maybe my time would never be good. Now I kind of know where time sits. I know I sit on top of the beat because I've done it enough. And I know when I work in a studio, I still sit on top of the beat because that's more my thing, to be on it. It's more of a New York thing. So I'm aware when I'm playing with people and the tempos are slow, I have a tendency to try to pull it back. And I'll sit further back on it just because of that if there's no click. If there's a click, I still have a tendency to go center to pushing because I have those moments. And I'm not afraid to play with the click where I get on top and then pull back a little bit, which is something that you don't do today because everything's gridded, and they're like the producer's either looking for that backside Nashville thing, or they're looking for you to be dead on, and they're going to fix you if you're not, which is what's destroying music today because everything's getting on the grid. Back in the early days of the click, when it was a 24-track tape, you basically, at that point in time, you were listening to a click. You weren't seeing it on a grid. You couldn't see if you were milliseconds ahead or behind. You just heard it, and you said, oh yeah, he's with the click. I hear it. It was obvious. That's what I was dealing with. I was obviously not with it, okay? Today, I'm with it, but then all of a sudden you look and I'm a little ahead or a little behind, and you see it. You see it on the grid. That drives people nuts sometimes. and they have to fix it. So, but I would say don't let people discourage you. If you want to do something, hang in there and do it. All right. Thank you for watching Ask Earl Anything. Your questions make the show. If I don't have questions, I don't have a show. I do appreciate all the questions. Thank you so much for watching, and God bless. Have a great day.